of mine after the campaign as it did during the campaign. And I think all of that is going to be helpful in making sure view or
Hey, Matthew. Looking for a portable heater. One in my office died. I didn't have shit at Dollar General. Gotta go to a real store, I guess. I'm just heading to Monroe. Hopefully hire a few people today.
What did he learn from campaigning for the 2024 election? Even go ahead. That's a question posed by a member of our Awakened Wonder community that you can join by downloading locals and becoming a member of our community. The app is free, the content is free, but there is additional content for our supporters, like the ability to join us for live conversations, like one exclusive video per week, like this fantastic conversation that is about anti-authoritarianism and reclaiming your individual sovereignty. Have a look.
It's a wonderful thing to learn to be able to stand up and yell bullshit, because so much is being slung and nobody is talking about the primacy of experience and the dignity of the individual. The dignity of the individual. We went a long way with this in America before we betrayed it. And it wasn't only betrayed by the clowns in Washington. It's also betrayed by anybody who clusters themselves at the feet of some self-proclaimed nabob.
I don't know what nabob means, but I like the idea of the dignity of the individual, because say if you're a libertarian of the right, you believe in tradition, you're Christian, whatever, or you're a very progressive person that believes in non-binary, fluid forms of identity. Terence McKenna is saying that
Terence McKenna.
The sovereignty of the individual. I hear that spoken of a lot, that within you as an individual is something that should be regarded. That's why you don't tread on people and you push people around. You don't know what it's like to be there. You allow people to be who they are and try and find ways of fruiting catacomb and consent and cooperating with one another, I suppose, like Sesame Street.
Yeah, I did get a good rest.
Minutes of the conversation will be available on YouTube. Well, let me have a spritz of the old Charlize. Keeps me young and beautiful and powerful. But then we'll only be on Rumble. So, as you know, Vivek Ramaswamy is a Republican presidential candidate. He's founded multi-billion-dollar enterprises, led a biotech company as CIO, trained as a scientist at Harvard, and you can follow Vivek on X at Vivek G. Ramaswamy. And here's the conversation. Remember, we recorded this earlier with our locals community, which you can join at any time, and then you'll be part of our conversations with brilliant auteurs and anti-establishment figures. But now, without further delay, Vivek Ramaswamy. Hey, thank you so much for joining us for Stay Free with Russell Brand. It's lovely to see you.
Good to see you, man.
What an adjustment you've made. You've gone from campaigning and therefore, I suppose, to a degree, on the very front line to being in this new position of advocacy. I was very much enjoying some of the with CNN when you spoke about January 6th. How do you feel now that your role is to support Trump, an America First nativist candidate? Do you feel relieved? Do you feel excited? And will you be, do you imagine, part of the administration in the event of a Trump victory?
Yeah, so I'm not a big advanced planner. It's one of the things that my life has taught me, Russell, is your plans are right? Whenever, at least for me, I don't know about you, but whenever you sort of made dead set plans and plot everything out, it never goes to that plan anyway. I did run for president with the sole intention of being the next president. The beauty of this country is that's up to the people, and the people made clear who they want this time, which is the other America First leader who's tried and true, who's done it before, and that's Donald Trump, and he has my full support. But my strategy, I think going forward, whatever I do is going to be the same as it was during the campaign, which is to speak the truth, speaking an unvarnished
Be right
way,
back.
at the very least, my true view what it is. And I think that we don't have enough of that in our culture anymore amongst politicians, amongst media personalities. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do, is to especially speak hard truths that maybe are a little bit beneath the surface of what the rest of the corporate media is scratching on issues that matter to me. I think I'm paying a lot more attention increasingly to what is, I think, a smoke screen around the border debate in the United States. I think that going deeper into some of the themes that I raised in the campaign trail about the media's dishonesty remain of interest to me. From the truth of what happened on January 6th to the truth of what happened with the origin of COVID. I mean, we can go straight down. I've had some, more recent experiences with the media's intentional distortion of things that I've said late in the campaign or towards the end of it. Regardless, I think restoring media honesty, or at least the public's understanding of the media's dishonesty, remains a passion of mine after the campaign, as it did during the campaign. And I think all of that is going to be helpful in making sure that not only is Donald Trump elected as the next president, but that our America First movement, our, I would say, George Washingtonian movement that began in 1776 is able to be carried forward another 250 years and then some. And so that's my focus, in whatever form that takes, be it inside government or out. I'm all in for doing my small part to make this country's future a reality.
One of the reasons that we were excited about you on our channel is your ability to communicate, your ability to pull together a variety of ideas, to present cogent arguments spontaneously. And I've been fond of saying that you are the first true social media political figure. Because, of course, RFK has benefited hugely from the way that legacy media has lost its stranglehold on the minds of American people. Donald Trump, through his use of Twitter, was able to sort of govern through social media and certainly influence powerfully. And even like in countries like Greece and Spain, there were movements like Syriza and Podemos that were doubtless anti-establishment movements. Do you feel that it's going to be impossible for the legacy media to ever again regain the kind of control over the minds of the American and indeed global population? Do you see this raft of censorship laws like the online safety bill in the UK, the laws being passed across the EU, into Canada, and some of the stuff proposed in your country as a direct threat to independent media? And do you think that we'll see more political figures like you emerging across the world? They're essentially bypassing authoritarian, centralized legacy media and their affiliated groups, be they corporate or state.
Yeah, so I like the way you framed that, by the way, affiliated groups. And in the US, you do have a quasi-state media. It's not really the traditional version of what you think of as state media, but it's like a game theory, right? In a game theoretic repeated game, they start behaving as though they're like state media because they get a pat on the back when they do. So I'll make a couple of observations. The trend is definitely in the direction that you just mentioned, which is, I think, bypassing that corporate media. But a couple of observations to make beyond that. I think that we're nowhere near that being the decisive factor. To the contrary, one of my learnings in this campaign is that, for better or worse, I think it's for worse, the legacy corporate media still played and continues to play in this election a major role in defining the public's perception of individual candidates and the issues that are put in front of them. People like to think of themselves as independent, but I think it's part of our human nature that most of us still behave like sheep, right? There's a sheep and there's a lion inside each of us. And I think it's true of you, it's true of me, it's true of every human being. It's wired in each of us. But as much as we like to think of ourselves as independent consumers, it's less about the top-down battle between independent media and corporate media, but more, what is it inside each of us that makes us want to bend the knee to some kind of authority? And I think that element that makes you still even think, okay, I'm not believing what I'm being force-fed by CNN or cable news or whatever. There's an element of it, the sheep inside each of us, that views that as a legitimizing filter. And one of the things I learned during the campaign is, even as much as people will seek independent alternative opinions, right now we're still in a place where, if we're being honest, most of the electorate, especially people above the age of 40, view that as still, even if they're consuming some of their information independently, they still view that as the alt, as the alternative, as the indie track that they want to hear, but it's not necessarily, it causes them to question what they still view as the traditional means of consuming information. So where I think is, yes, the optimistic side is what you said is true. That's the evolution we're seeing. But the realistic even I would say somewhat pessimistic side is that's a very gradual trend and something that I might have wished to have happened over a matter of years, that we would already be there. No, we're far from it. I think it's going to be a slow trajectory in the impact of that legacy corporate media. The other thing I will say is the kinds of candidates that you're talking about, it's not just, and what should I say, an implementation question, right? Some people think, well, why don't you serve this up to, and I don't want to pick on any one other individual candidate in this election, but pick your favorite professional politician. Why didn't they do it like you're doing it? And if so, they would have been far more successful. Okay, fine. I'll use a specific example that I hear all the time. Ron DeSantis, right? I think if why did you run the campaign that you ran?
Lemon pancake.
Wouldn't that have been advice that his consultants could have given him? Maybe that'd be some of the answer. Or pick any other candidate too. It's not limited to one person. I think part of this is it's not just, oh, you turn that on and then you bid for social media. Part of what that modality demands is the ability to spontaneously respond, actually share what your own independent thoughts are. In order for you to do that, first you have to have independent thoughts. Second, you have to be willing to share them. And I think that that's something that most political candidates
no heater.
in the United States and traditional politicians who run for office around the world don't actually have. And I don't say that cynically. I say that what politics has become in much of the developed world, certainly in the United States, is an assembly line, right? The politicians are the products. The system churns them out like, they're on like a assembly line of a conveyor, sort of Henry Ford would be proud in terms of the repeatability of producing these kinds of products. But one thing about being a product is that you lose the ability to either have independent thoughts, or even for those who still have the
just getting coffee,
to have those independent thoughts left, have a reluctance to share that without going through the normal assembly line procedure. And so, I think that in the case of other candidates, one of the things I've learned about is many are good people. I think that many of the candidates I competed against, not all of them, but many of them are good people, but they're not wired in a way that allows themselves to either have those independent thoughts or to share them with the public, Republicans and Democrats alike. And so it's not just a matter of coaching more candidates that you're going to see using social media. That makes it sound like an implementation or a plumbing experiment. I think part of what you're seeing is far more what kinds of candidates are selected for. Is it the kind of candidate that's going to speak in an unfiltered way and take some risk? I mean, there's good reasons people don't want to do this, right? Something you'll say on the medium that you and I are having right now will inevitably be helicopter lifted from this conversation to the modality of linear cable media. And they will take something disproportionately out of context. Maybe it's a joke. This happened to me in the last couple of weeks. Say something in a joking tone. And then legacy corporate media purposefully knows how to exploit that. In the context of an hour, it might be a joke in reference to something that you and I said half an hour ago. But if you're doing a 2-minute clip, that is the perfect fodder for lifting that out and having that distorted in a way that penalizes the person for using that media in the first place, which then sees a confluence between both the kind of legacy corporate media and the kind of political politician creators, how those two things converge, is they create a disincentive for politicians to engage in new media in the first place, because so long as legacy media matters,
it's a small eater.
Like it not, it still does. It's a slow burn away from it. That's legacy media.
I really don't want to get one because it's almost,
new media is to create the disincentive for political participants.
When it gets cold in that office,
you increase the risk.
I usually have one going underneath my desk.
By the price that legacy media extracts from it. So that ends up becoming a complex game, cat and mouse game between legacy and
I don't want to
media.
spend the money I want either.
Incentives to create for them as a way of reclaiming what otherwise would have more naturally gone in the direction of discipline. So I'm sure I'm rambling, but
No,
maybe some of it's cheap.
no, it makes a lot of sense because in a sense, what you're, it seems illuminating is the idea that this media for an anti-establishment candidate is successful in an environment where recently there was a poll in the UK. Which politician would you like to lead the UK? Current PM Rishi Sunak, leader of the opposition Keir Starmer, or Vladimir Putin? And Vladimir Putin won by 9% just because there's been so much bombardment. It was a poll of 40,000 people. And like, if your position is, I do not trust the establishment, whether that's deep state agencies, the government itself, corporations, legacy media, you can operate in these looser, long-form spaces, knowing that people almost have a, if not a sophistication, a tolerance that if you make some joke or reference about Nikki Haley or the Koch brothers, or some reference to Ron DeSantis, that people recognise, or Trump saying I'll be dictator for a day, people seeing that, oh, that was a joke. They won't deliberately extract it, narrativize it, knowing that it will have a certain amount of impact. In fact, I was really struck by a speech that Barack Obama gave at Stanford immediately prior to some proposed legislation to introduce further censorship to social media spaces, where what Barack Obama said was that independent media, even when people don't believe it, it muddies the water. And I thought actually the reverse is true. It's the legacy media that muddies the water. Even when you're at the point where you think, no, hold on, Ukraine can't beat Russia in a war. It doesn't matter how long we perpetuate it. Ultimately, Russia will be successful unless it escalates to being a conflict that involves more nations. But like, you're able to sort of hold at bay that obvious conclusion by muddying the water. Or it seems like they never clinically trialed these medicines for transmission. Why on earth were they saying you'll kill grandma? Hold on a minute, the 6 feet distance was arbitrary. Why were we doing that? How can we ever trust it again? Through legacy media, through various talk show hosts dancing around dressed as vaccines, through each demographic having their own musical number, whether you're gay or black or country, whatever it is you're to, they found a piece of propaganda for you. It's the legacy media that creates that. Have you found that to be true, for example, around January 6th or even 9/11, or many of the subjects you've spoken about? Okay, we're going to stop the conversation now, Vivek, because we are getting dangerously close to breaching the YouTube guidelines as downloaded from the WHO. To see the answer for that question, click the link in the description. Get over now to Rumble, where we don't speak hatefully, we speak freely, and I pray that we bring people together from across all cultural groups, that we can unify, unite, and fight against establishment power. See you there in a few seconds. Is the countdown nearly done? It's nearly done. Okay, join us there. Remember, become an Awaken Wonder, and you could have seen chats like that live and pose questions to Vivek. See you in a second.
You know, absolutely. I mean, I think that my view is you shouldn't ban any modality, or you shouldn't put negative pressure against any modality. Leave it up to the people to decide. So there's two elements of this, Russell. Is when Obama makes comments like that, what he's actually doing is it's not just tipping the scales towards some type of censorship regime, though it can go in that direction too, but it's planting the seeds of doubt in the mind of the electorate or the consumer of that information. And it goes back to, I think this is one of the things I've learned in this campaign, is the problem we have in this country, I think in the modern West more broadly, there is a major top-down problem, no doubt about it. But it's not just the top-down problem of the government working with private actors, each scratching each other's back. It happens using tech companies to silence speech, either directly or indirectly through the back door. And it's not just silencing through suppression, it's silencing through shadow banning or otherwise, as a favor for the government, but the government then scratches their back with lighter regulation or vice versa. That's what I call the top-down problem, the rise of this woke industrial complex in America, and where I've focused for much of the last several years. And I remain focused. But it's not just that. Equally important is that other half of the problem, where when we lose our own anchoring of what matters to us, right? Even different people, you have different things fill in the blank. Faith, patriotism, hard work, family, self-confidence, achievement, whatever it is, the things that give us our own glory and sense of self-confidence. When we lose that, then there's something about
this truck having to hit his brakes?
Inside leaves this
Got somebody
vacuum
in front of him,
in our
brake
heart
checker.
that causes us to look for legitimization externally. And that's what causes us to want to think. So you don't pledge allegiance to the real flag, you're going to pledge allegiance to something else. Maybe it'll be the transgender flag, maybe it'll be the Ukraine flag, maybe it'll be CNN, right? And so I think that is something where we, especially in the conservative movement, have not done a good enough job of really admitting to ourselves, is that human beings are fallen, and we have in our very nature a desire to believe in something bigger than ourselves that almost legitimizes ourselves and our own beliefs. And there's something about the history of the way legacy media and the role it's occupied in culture that causes, it's not just the government's foisting of it that causes its continued existence. It's a kind of psychological insecurity in the general populace that says even in a world where people are able to access you through local or Rumble, or whatever, that they still need what they view as the baseline arbiter of truth against which you are the alternative, versus the other way around, which is to say that there's a even marketplace of ideas, and I truly am independent and able to consume and form my own opinions on my own merits. And I think there's, especially younger people, more of them are maybe headed in that direction, but that's a slow shift. And so when Obama says something like that, it's about sowing the seeds of doubt in people who might have otherwise taken that step anyway, but to awaken in them that inner sheep within. And that's something I'm increasingly, more so at the later phase of this, after having finished the campaign, drawn to than even I was in the very beginning. Is it's not just a top-down problem, it's a bottom-up cultural revival that we're going to need as well. And it's not just going to happen through political leadership. It's going to happen through leaders in other spheres of our lives, causing people to awaken their own independent selves as well, as opposed to being automatons, doing what we're programmed to do on a given day, what the country looks like to me on certain days. I think that programming of our automaton mindset equally part of the problem that we have to tackle in this country.
It's pretty clear that there would be anthropological reasons to align yourself with a group, or at least not nominate yourself as an outlier, that exposes you to potential persecution. And it seems important to make this distinction that even when people are sympathetic to the views of Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson, or people enjoy the punditry and prose of Vivek Ramaswamy, it's by default, by your reckoning, being opposed to what they might hear from Karine Jean-Pierre or Joe Biden, as this is the establishment rhetoric, this is the alternative. To establish a kind of levelling that's a sort of a bold idea. Often in this space, and it's something I'm sure you're familiar with now because you've mastered this space, certainly you've learned how to utilize the space very successfully. The term controlled opposition, like it's something that I've been accused of, that Alex Jones has been accused of, Tucker Carlson gets accused of. These are controlled opposition. And I think, well, in a sense, perhaps I am. People sometimes won't think it's enough, because certainly I'm not in any complicit way getting told, here, say this, say that. Because, my strongest, deepest, most vehement belief, Vivek, is that wherever possible, authority should be decentralized, that the sovereignty of the individual is paramount, that communities should be autonomous wherever possible, that we should debate, discuss, and vote on how our shared, collective, and individual resources are aggregated in order to create a sense of nation or state or city or whatever is, I'd say the smallest denomination is the most favourable. That's what I believe in myself, and I know I don't have relationships with legacy media. I know they see me as an enemy, and they treat me like an enemy, and they have treated me like an enemy. But I still wonder if, what is it that we're doing that allows people to think, this is just a condiment, an alternative, before we comply.
Yeah, I think that. I wouldn't get like overly psychological here, but that's where we're going. So I think it's actually a projection. I think for many of the people who might say that about you or Alex Jones or Tucker, I've heard my share of that as well. It goes back to that element that resides with each of us. And so there's an element inside each person who is even an anti-establishment viewer or consumer or voter or audience member who still senses their gravitational pull to bend the knee to something, but I think that guilt ends up showing up in the form of self-log. Well, if that can happen to me, then you know what? It's probably true of Russell Brand, or whoever else that's speaking to me too. Controlled opposition. When in fact, I think that's a little bit of often a projection of just what's part of each of our own human nature. I think we all admit that about ourselves. It's true of me, it's true of you, it's true of probably every other individual you mentioned too. That there's something, we just admit that about ourselves. We're human beings, we're fallen. And so there's a part of us. Now, once you're conscious of it, that's your path to liberation. But if you're conscious of it, there's something inside me that makes me want to bend the knee to authority or to supplicate to something, no matter how independent I might think of myself as being. That even subconsciously, there's some element of me that's going to comply with some sort of higher authority that I may not recognize, but I know that that's going to exist. That consciousness, I think, is the liberation. Now, what I see happening, it descends into this tug of warism, is that many of those audience members may see the same thing in themselves, but then use that to sort of point the finger to you or whoever else, Tucker or Alex or whoever else they would say the same thing about, instead of actually all recognizing it's true of all of us. Great, now we're free. We understand that. Now we can actually engage in honest discourse and recognize that amongst each other or amongst even within ourselves, what elements of our own bias, maybe as anti-establishment as we might be, still have some vestige of a bias that we didn't recognize, and then say, hey, we're all open to that. I think that's actually the place to go. And then the other thing I would say in terms of what an alternative media institution looks like, and I've been giving, very recently a lot of thought to this as well, is right now, legacy media institutions are built in central command and control category. If you look at most cable news operators, it almost doesn't matter who's on the air. All that matters is they're part of a general machine and they're mouthpiece. Whereas the thing about independent media is the locus of trust is actually built at the level of the individual. And there is no, by definition, one-stop shop, centralized place to go. And so I wonder if there's some element of creating kind of an inside-out model where the business model is run such that the actual individual who's the locus of trust, people like yourself, et cetera, are uncapped upside in the amount of money they generate, et cetera, are completely unfiltered in terms of the content they can bring, but still has some sort of hub and spoke where there still is a hub, just in terms of the level of organization, how it's set up. That's what a long-run competitor to the New York Times or CNN, I think, has got to look like in order to really eliminate the existing need that people still have to go to that centralized one-stop shop. Does that make sense what I'm telling you here?
Yes, it does. That there needs to be this facility.
I think that's what's going to happen. And I think that that's a vacuum. It doesn't quite exist in the marketplace. Establishment Canada. That base need that consumers and audience members and voters have to still have their default against which you're the interesting alternative, to say that no, it's actually just one level playing field of equal. Everyone's an alternative among equals of alternatives. I think that in the media, you have to give people that sense that they're still having some blanket of permanence and, dare I say, security. It's just part of a human nature that people have. But actually, the way that it's run is still completely 100% unfiltered. The people who are making the money are the actual people who are looking the audience members in the eye. But there's still just an established alternative to an existing centralized command and control operation. I think that's where the equilibrium will ultimately settle, and we're not there right now. But without that, I think that there will always be, because of our human nature, that kind of trust deficit against which the alternative is an alternative, rather than actually on an equal playing field relative to the status quo. So one of my learnings, at least in the campaign, is in the debates. I'll give you one example of this, Russell. The presidential debates. You saw most of them, or we had? Yeah. So one thing I learned through the campaign is that the true audience of those presidential debates is not actually the viewership of voters. It's the media filter that distills what happens on the debates. Because here's just the arithmetic of it. Of the 330 million people in the United States, a tiny, and I'm talking like very tiny, certainly by the third and fourth debates, which I thought were some of the best ones, certainly, the ones where I had the most fun, and I think actually were some of the best ones. We're talking like 0.3% of the voting public ever saw even a portion of that debate in any actual form themselves. But you're talking about hundreds of millions of people who read the media's distillation of what actually happened, be it from a combination of New York Times, CNN, and you go straight down the list. And then you actually look at the juxtaposition between people who distill the media listed debates, what they say happened, versus actually seeing what actually happened. And it might have been two completely different worlds. You might as well have been living in two completely different worlds. It might have been two alternative events. The person who reads what happened and the person who watched it would recognize them as not even being descriptions of the same phenomenon. But it doesn't matter, because the real audience was never the people in the first place. That was just a charade to make you think that this thing called debate happened. When in fact, most people's experience of the presidential debates came not from watching the presidential debates at all. It came from reading the descriptions of what happened during the presidential debates, which means that if you figure that out and you realize that's your actual audience, it then shapes what you say on that stage. And so it's an interesting game that you see firsthand, that this idea that you were reaching the people directly at all was illuminated in the first place. And the people who played that game well are really, I think, professional politicians who understand who their audience actually is, versus the people on the internet or whatever that even saw clips of the debates, let alone actually the debate itself. understood that the reality of what happened was very different. A lot of those were my supporter base, but it turns out that that is a tiny fraction of the overall viewership. And so it creates this game, and until we've created an equal playing field where the people at home themselves, people say, I don't need to watch that, I can just read what the summary was the next day. That's most people. And until those people view alternative sources of media consumption in the same way and with the same level of implicit trust that they have from legacy media institutions that they should have no basis to trust in the first place, we're not going to see major change, which is why I think alternative media needs to move one step further in leveling up the psychology of how it interfaces with the people who are actually consuming, not some alternative, but is really in an even playing field with the legacy media institutions.
Well, I have one. Oh, sorry, I just seen your message.
Can't bring you this
I have a desk heater, but
partners who support us lovingly.
It's not working anymore. And I'm not sure I even want to get another one. I don't spend enough time there.
Of Charlize is an avant-garde and unusual woman.
I mean, I'll be able to get one inexpensive.
She's on one of Joe Biden's most
This time of year, they're not easy to find.
Skullduggery of some description, like
Usually Dollar General has a bunch of little small ones.
With Charlize is establish a makeup and cosmetics brand that refuses to use toxic substances, uses high quality vibrational Italian glass that's not going to negatively impact the product within, as well as beautifully packaged product. This is the toner, for example. Now this toner is generated as a result of research in Switzerland using, get this, apple stem cells. Apple stem cells, as you know, if you've got fruit in your house, apple stem cells make apples last longer. Fruity banana, or the decaying apricot, let alone the stinking and wretched peach. Apple stem cells are in this toner, and the beautiful qualities that they endow the holy apple with could be taking place right on your face. The Charlize skincare line is 100% toxic-free, wild harvested, made in your country, the United States, because it's effective in fighting the signs of aging. Right now, you get 25% off by going to charlize.beauty and using the promo code BRAND. You get 25% off for doing that. And let me know, do you think, and I'm talking to you, Charlene, as well as anyone who might be thinking of buying this package box as a gift for a loved one, do you think I should shave this beard down and just have a scar?
No big deal. I get one. It's just not that it's not that big a deal.
Charlene, do you
like I said, they're all expensive. So.
Okay, let's get back into.
The one I had lasted about 3 years, and I ran the fuck out of that thing.
Perhaps this point could be extrapolated further, Vivek, that we would naively on the surface assume that an orator or candidate is directly addressing a voting population. But the experienced politician, perhaps even a figure like Joe Biden, knows that he's talking to the electoral college or some smaller democratic unit. And it's clear that from the strategies of a politician like Biden, like against Trump round one, just keep this guy out of the way, let the anti-Trump sentiment of our, inverted commas, natural audience abide, and he will reach the people that he is required to reach. And perhaps there are whole sort of modalities of donor, of legacy media, of corporate interest that all interact, and ultimately where we, like giddy and passionate and carnal, assume, oh wow, look at this person's doing really well in the debate. Oh, that was a zinger. Oh, that point destroyed Nikki
Country
Haley.
boy
oh,
racing.
This is funny, man. That's just taking place. That might as well be sport. And yes, and it's interesting to know how these function, because I think that the fear of populism and the ongoing perjuring of the term, or decimation and attacks of populism, the attempt to make populism itself a negative idea, is the terrible threat that there might be, because of the way that independent media is altering and radically evolving, the potential exists for individuals and movements to emerge where what happens is the power of the population is directly harnessed and bypasses all of those gatekeepers, all of those institutions. And if you look at, say, the farming, like, gosh, this sounds quite tangential, Vivek, but the farming movement across Europe, like, you know, they're protesting in Germany, they're protesting in Holland and France.
It's not tangential at all. No.
They're taking power, and they're not waiting and going to, you know, whatever the national broadcaster is in France or Germany, or to Der Spiegel or Figaro, or it's happening in Spain as well, and sort of saying, oh, do we have your permission and would you support our campaign? They're just doing it. And then you have a figure like Tucker Carlson, going to Russia to talk to Putin. And obviously the threat is that if on X we have the opportunity to watch Vladimir Putin and we hear Vladimir Putin say, stay out of Crimea, allow some freedom of cultural expression in the Donbass for the people that affiliate with Russia, and don't let Ukraine join NATO. If we hear Putin say, you know, you've got a deal, the war's over, then the American taxpayer, the British taxpayer, all of us that are funding NATO might go, well, what is it that NATO's done for me lately? And start to question the entire damn narrative. I mean, that's the threat of populism, even if you're right that there's some way to go before these monoliths of the New York Times and the WHO and NATO, all of these powerful institutions are obviously in a death match right now. And you know, the outliers are sometimes quite easily subsumed back into the system. So what do you think about, Faris? I'd love to know what you think about what is the real threat of Tucker interviewing Putin, and what is the real power of the kind of activism we've seen in Canada with the truckers and across Europe with the farmers.
Well, this is what the American Revolution is about. Is do we actually trust people to self-govern? The negative valence attached to the term populism that we talked about, what is that about? It's about, do you believe that the people can be trusted to self-govern? That the elected should be responsive to the will of the people? Or do you believe they should be responsive to a different will, something other than the will of the people? There's two things. Either the will of the people, that's really what modern populism is about, giving the people what they want, or should you give somebody else what they want, other than whoever the populacists may have about? That's what the American Revolution was really about. I mean, in the American Revolution's terms, it was about the monarchy, who are a small, selective group of enlightened elites.
Now you're going to fucking speed up. You're a fucking moron.
That would be what the people want themselves. And here's the rub at the heart of this, Russell, is it's not even in their own minds nefarious, right? This idea we're talking about on the debate stage. Who do you view as your audience? I view my audience as the electorate of the United States, the people of this country, 30 million American citizens. But it turns out most of their trained professional politicians understand that that's a joke, because that doesn't matter. The system is set up for a 0.01% of those people to be your audience within the filters of deciding what the rest of the masses can and cannot hear or consume. Here's the dirty little secret at the heart of this. That 0.01%, they don't think that they're acting nefariously. They don't view this as betraying the interests of the broader community. They view themselves as actually acting in the interests of the broader community, because the whole premise is that the people could not be trusted to self-govern in the first place. So I think you got to understand that it's not even in their own minds coming from a place of ill will. It's coming from a place of benevolence, actually. So bring that to the Tucker question. What this relates to is the same thing as it relates to the origin of COVID-19 or the National Transgender Shooter Manifesto or the truth of what happened on January 6th. You go straight down the list of every other truth that's been suppressed. The people cannot be trusted to deal with the primary information. It's up to us, for the good of the people, and this is the key part to understand, is the mindset. It's for the good of the people, we have to make sure that the people are served up what they can actually handle. It's like at the end of the movie, you ever watch A Few Good Men? Yeah, it's like Colonel Jessup at the end of the movie. It's what he embodies is, you can't handle the truth. In his mind, it wasn't that he was trying to do something that was ill-begotten for the American people. He viewed himself as, and in some sense our country has been structured for a very long time as, him being a patriot. This is a guy who makes the sacrifice that needs to be made, that bears that cross on his shoulder of knowing the actual truth, but serving as the gatekeeper and the filter, because you can't handle it. That's the albatross, that's the cross that the true leader bears, is to say that I will bear the truth of the actual reality so that people give the populace what they can otherwise handle, be it the truth of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, the truth of what happened on January 6th, the truth of where COVID began early in the pandemic, which we knew and should have known, the truth of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that never was, the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop story on the eve of the last election, the truth of what, it goes straight down the list, about the wall. He goes straight down the list in the last 10 years. You can probably rattle off 10 more instances of what you would call the noble lie. I don't think it's a noble lie, but it's described as the noble lie. This is ancient. I mean, you go back to Socrates. He would talk about Plato, would talk about the noble lie. People could not be trusted with the truth. And the beauty of 1776 and the American Revolution is we said hell no to that, didn't we? It was for better or worse, and it was an effort for worse. But for better or worse, we the people can be trusted to self-govern.
Bunch of used cars.
Demand the truth. We people demand free.
And its window opener was busted out.
And millions of countries short longer get
Or if they're junked.
But in the long run, we still believe that is what is right. And what
They
is
all look like
just
their bodies were in good shape.
to be able to self-govern. That's really that age-old question that reared its head during the American Revolution. And in some sense, even reared its head again 13 years later with the French Revolution. Although that was, I think, a complicated form. It rears its head again every century or so, and it's rearing its head again now. Can we, the people, be trusted to self-govern or not? And I think that there are most in modern institutional life who believe that the answer to that question is no. It's a crazy idea. That you get to speak your mind freely as long as I get to it. That every one of us gets a voice and vote counts equally in the democratic constitution. And the thing to realize about this, Russell, we gotta admit this, is people like you and I, we're the weird ones, actually. Because for most of human history, it was done the other way. I mean, if you look at the totality of all human history, not just old world Europe before the American Revolution, but just all of human history. You go back to Plato's.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Conventional wisdom amongst the wise for most of human history has been societies can't function if we trust individuals to be able to immediately have an institution, government, responsive exclusively to their interests. The whims of people who cause themselves to be defeated to a death if it never got climate change is what it's really about. So belief is just too good. We're going to burn the planet out of existence and we don't have a planet left to happen. So what a silly idea that would be to leave it to the people to self-govern versus a group of enlightened elites that have to save the very existence of the planet itself. That's not a climate change word. But it's an age-old question that's always been played out this way. But once we embrace that to say that, no, we're the real ones, and in America, I say this, we're the real ones on this side of 1776 in the New World, in the United States of America. Yes, we are the departure from the rest of human history. Once we embrace that that's what makes America great, that's what makes America excel.
I don't know what I don't think you can give that much. I don't know. Maybe you can. I don't know.
That's hope for the rest of the free world. They can use that as, I say from with an American conceit, but I think it's true.
I do think there is a max.
Hope of what's possible. But America itself, that shines
Probably less than that.
still shines. The rest of the free world then has no hope as well. It's old world Europe all over again. That's what the Great Reset. That's what the Davos World
Lifetime's winner
is all about. It's not some modern, new, nefarious tendency. I think what we have to actually read is this is nothing more than a reversion to the norm, actually, for what the case of most of human history. And once you see it that way, I think we're closer to being over the target, but actually it's not this new pernicious force threatening our way of life.
Yeah, I thought it was weird. You were already in my bookmarks from giving you that TTS. But for some reason, I just wanted to, I searched that username anyway, and then the two names popped up. I just didn't want you to get robbed by somebody. I don't know if you know that name or.
I've got 3 more questions and they're all pretty good. We've only got you for 1 more minute. Can I ask my 3 questions?
We'll go rapid fire.
They're pretty good. Everyone in America, other than the native people, was an immigrant at some point. Do you think that in order to morally legitimize the rigid closure of American borders, America has to withdraw from foreign wars, to recognize that there's a connection between foreign wars and destabilized migrant populations? And if it's not directly because of wars, it's sometimes other aspects of globalism and America having a punitive relationship with states. For example, a significant number of people crossing the border will be from Venezuela and Ecuador, where the United States have previously had relationships that have been to some degree exploitative. So, does the end of American interventionism abroad have to be a part of a rigid and closed borders policy? What are your thoughts on that, Frank?
I mean, these are two sides of the same. It's a deep point you're touching on, Russell, but I'll make it much more simple and practical. Rather than focusing on sealing somebody else's border using our military halfway around the world, let's focus on sealing our own border in this own country.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me screenshot it. For some reason, it doesn't let you screenshot that page on PayPal, on the mobile app anyway. I'll log in on the computer and take a picture of it. Or just
He was Nicaraguan immigrant to the United States, but he had a wild story where he came here to go to art school, get education. And then the U.S. tried to recruit him, this is back in, I want to say, the early 80s, to play a role in the Contras in Nicaragua. And he refused to do it. But then he ended up getting all kinds of hot water in the United States. And He talked about his own friends in the U.S. talking, hey, these Nicaraguan people, they're so violent. What's going on? What's going on with all that violence down there? He's like, no. I personally have been almost a national security establishment to play a role in the Congress in Central America. And yet you wonder why these people are actually as violent as they are, as though there was no connection. So that's actually the deeper point that you're making, is the more that you actually create. Ron Paul, I think, did a good job making this point with his presidential run. Is a lot of the problems you create at home come from actually the network.
All right. So you see there's two steam stacks there to the right.
In simple terms, I would put that.
There's one that's closer, and then you see one in the distance off to the left a little bit.
Using our military to steal somebody else's border somewhere out there around the world. Let's first actually start by using our own resources.
The one to the left is a Fermi 2 nuclear power plant. I was trying to show that to Dirty the other day.
Had I been elected president, that's certainly the vision I would have restored. And, in whatever way I can, try to make sure. And I think Donald Trump is a great option. Is the option. Who's going to be the person who actually leads us in that direction in the next 4 years.
That was to be decommissioned about 5 years ago, but they changed their mind on
Is
it.
Nikki Haley a uniparty stooge, the preferred candidate of the establishment and the Democrats? Is the Nikki Haley candidacy?
They thought when they built the one to the right that would be enough.
Both parties.
Of course, it's not.
In the event that there is
Everything's
if
elected
there is an
now.
election in 2024, if it goes ahead, in order to not have any candidate that isn't inverted commas anti-establishment candidate. Is that your position?
Did it give it to you? I don't think it did. Usually it won't let you give that much.
I think the establishment's going to be successful, and I think one of the great learnings for me is if you want to prevent something bad from happening, it's a problem. First, name the problem. And once you name the problem, it becomes a lot more difficult for people to accommodate. And so I've been saying this for months at this point. Even with the Free Mondo, or even with our own conservative base, the American First base, many people exfoliate me for saying that it's true. The entire system has been conspiring, I believe, indirectly it's a game theory of conspiring, not approach for cigars, the root smoke conspiring. A game theory of conspiring, which is a repeated tacit game theory. Narrowing this down to two candidates, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, in one way or another, eliminate Trump.
Where the fuck you going, dude? You gotta go to the right. I knew it.
Now, the more we don't name that problem, the harder it becomes, the harder it becomes for people to pull it off. And that's also part of why I dropped out what I did and threw my support behind Donald Trump at 8%. I always believe in saying personal nature. I want to be clear that Nikki Haley should not come anywhere within striking distance of anywhere close to preventing any levels of power. And so, thankfully, I think after the Hampshire, this primary is being done. I think that it's now about moving to general election phase, where I think the establishment is now likely. I think Nikki Haley, Brett Peter is not eliminated until he officially drops out. For all intents and purposes, I think it's off the general election. And you're going to see that same establishment now crop up. Another puppet who they can fight in the Democratic Party. So if you try to do it in the Republican Party, I think that has mostly failed. All but the final steps have had to fail. To then turn to the Democratic Party as a vehicle to do what they couldn't do through the Republican Party. It's not Republican versus Democrat so much as an existing pervasive bipartisan uniparty establishment that I think has lost their use for Joe Biden as a puppet. So I do think that once it's crystal clear, I think it's already basically clear, but once it's crystal clear that Donald Trump is definitively the Republican nominee, they will turn to then finding a better puppet who they can use through the Democratic Party to advance their objectives than Joe Biden.
I had to hurry up and get in front of me so he could exit as well.
Michelle Obama, someone more capable emerging. And do you feel that this is a question from Neo Grammarian in the chat? Actually,
Tuesday, 20% off, rooted and zooted.
Questions to our guests. They ask, do you feel that there will be some concocted emergency to somehow used to cancel the elections in the event that Trump is incarcerated? Do you envisage a free and fair election in 2024? And if it is Trump, who do you imagine will be Trump versus of those potential candidates?
So I think that Trump versus fill in the blank, someone other than Biden is not crazy. I think Trump versus Michelle Obama is not crazy. I mean, I've no basis other than just watching and observing what I see publicly transpiring. I think the system has decided they will stop at nothing to keep Donald Trump from returning to office. And I think they tried to use Nikki Haley as their first stooge to do that within the Republican Party. Thankfully, I think we managed to have staved that off. I think they will then turn to the Democratic Party as a vehicle to do it, turn to the legal system, the extrajudicial system to do it. So I'm not God, you're not God, and so none of us can, I'm not in the business of predicting like what exactly is one individual thing that's going to happen. I'm in the business of observing what the collective facts are and incentives are that are hiding in plain sight, and just connect those dots, make those observations. The future, as we human beings perceive it, is what? A distribution of probability. It's probability distribution, potential outcome. Okay? But what we can do better, and this isn't conspiracy theorizing. Conspiracy theorizing is assuming a bunch of people get together in some smoke-filled room and are plotting out how to take over the universe. I don't think that's how it works exactly. I think the way it works is you have collective incentives that are hiding in plain sight, an amalgam of those incentives. They're often difficult to see, but you have to connect those dots, and that makes the future possibilities that much more clear. And so I think that's what led me to my view about what they were trying to do. They could Haley name that problem, and then it becomes harder for them to act on those incentives. And the same thing goes for, okay, if it's not that, then they're going to turn to the next thing and use the Democratic Party as a vehicle to do it. And if they can't successfully do that, I think they will then turn to the next thing. So I think that's what this year holds in store. And our best way to prevent that from playing out is to name the problem. Once you just unsparingly name it to be true, actually call out that otherwise obtuse or obfuscated.
Holes, man. They're always working on those tracks, and they're always fucking garbage.
Once you smoke that out, it becomes a lot harder for them to continue to act out and play out that stuff. And so that's that, I think, game of cat and mouse. I think it's where it's important for folks like yourself, for independent voices, to be able to, connect those dots in a way that once you've named the problem, it becomes a lot harder for that problem to transpire. And for my part, that's something that I will continue to do over the course of this year as well. Is once you utter the words that should not be spoken, it becomes a lot harder for those unspoken words to then become reality. And so I think we have to be vigilant. And so I'm not going to sit here saying, okay, this is exactly what's going to happen over the next 9 months. What's going to happen over the next 9 months is in part a product of how vigilant we are to those possibilities. And I think it is vital that Donald Trump is successfully elected as the next U.S. president, lead the America First movement for the next 4 years. But let's keep in mind, that's just the next 4 years. We have another 250 years and then some still left if we do this right. But it requires us to be vigilant, as our founding fathers would admonish us to do. We can't just passively inherit this country that we call home. To the contrary, what we enjoy, the freedoms we enjoy, that's the exception, as I said earlier, to the human history. That exception doesn't last automatically. It's not something you just get to passively, lazily inherit. You have to consistently fight for it. Each generation does. And now it's up to us and the balls in our court to continue doing it. So I'm going to do my part, whatever I can from the outside. Part of that is calling out each of these issues, which is no small part of it. But, ultimately to see this through, we're going to have to shut down that deep state in Washington, D.C. and have to shut down those illicit relationships between that deep state and managerial class in three-letter government agencies and the private sector, from tech companies to media to banks to financial institutions. And I think we then create the space for that revival of individual self-confidence and purpose that makes sure that we no longer are sheepishly bending the knee to what we're force-fed. And I think all of those things are going to be required to revive this nation.
Vivek, thank you so much for your time, for your participation. Well done in a great campaign. Thank you for popularising some important ideas and for coming from nowhere and generating so much intrigue and excitement. I wish you all the best in your political career. I'm sure there's some exciting things to come. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Vivek. If you are an Awaken Wonder, remember you can join us for these conversations live as well as meditations. One exclusive video a week like this one. Have a look at this again.
It's a wonderful thing to learn to be able to stand up and yell bullshit, because so much is being slung and nobody is talking about the primacy of experience and the dignity of the individual. The dignity of the individual. We went a long way with this in America before we betrayed it. And it wasn't only betrayed by the clowns in Washington. It's also betrayed by anybody who clusters themselves around the feet of some self-proclaimed nabob.
I don't know what nabob means, but I like the idea of the dignity of the individual, because say if you're a libertarian of the right, you believe in tradition, you're Christian, whatever, or you're a very progressive person that believes in non-binary fluid forms of identity. Terence McKenna is saying that should be respected, the sovereignty of the individual. I hear that spoken of a lot, that within you as an individual is something that should be regarded. That's why you don't tread on people and you push people around. You don't know what it's like to be them. You allow people to be who they are and try and find ways of fruiting pattercode and consent, cooperating with one another, I suppose, like Sesame Street. Every week we make content like that exclusively for you. Become a member of our Awaken Wonder community. You can join for a month, you can join for a year. It's slightly cheaper to join for a year. I pray that it is worth it. As you know, in addition to this fantastic conversation, we are also providing a deeper, more thorough look at a news story from the week in our eyes. And here's the news. No, here's the news. Stay with us. Joe Rogan's just done the biggest deal in independent media history, as well as saying he wants nothing more to do with the left. So why is the left falling apart, and why can't it utilise powerful advocates like Joe Rogan? Now, Joe Rogan has just done the biggest deal in independent media history. He's survived some of the biggest attacks that the legacy media have ever tried to impose upon an independent voice. The N-word attacks, the horse-paced attacks, he shouldn't be allowed to have this audience. Why are people listening to Joe Rogan? Hey, that's not fair. Why do you listen to him? We got a newsroom and show you I put a tie on. People are infuriated, but there it is. The genie's out of the bowl. There's no question now that Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan are the biggest voices in independent media, and people are losing their trust and leaving legacy media resources in their droves. They're losing viewers, they're losing power, they're losing advertising. Could there be a connection between this decline of trust in the legacy media
Dog was
and
attacking
the
that car.
neoliberal values, or what Joe Rogan is, the lunatic left? I know Joe Rogan, I've been on that show a few times, and I think he's a great person, and I would say that he has what you'd call liberal values, like he just wants to sort of be left alone, doesn't care about people's identities or cultural choices, believes in democracy and representation and voting and all that kind of stuff. So what is someone that the left could have grabbed and turned into a hero rejecting the left? Is it because the left has gone kind of crazy, lost all its values and principles, doesn't mean anything anymore? Let's have a look at what he said.
You guys have a good day too.
The most significant
No
voice in
desktop stream
independent
today.
I used to be a part of the Blue Bubble. I was 100%
Love you guys.
a left-leaning person who lived in
Peace.
Los Angeles.
As well as I was as well. I worked in Hollywood, worked in British media, and when